Good morning, grade 7. Today's lesson will be about Quarter 3, Module 7, Charging Processes. Objectives: describe the different types of charging processes. At the end of this module, you are expected to 1. Describe the different charging processes such as through friction and induction. 2. Perform a simple experiment on charging process using household materials. 3. Practice the importance of polarization and grounding in electrical devices. And 4. Recognize the importance of electricity in our everyday lives. What I know. Choose the letter of the best answer. Write the letter of your choice on your answer sheet. See pages 1 to 3 of Quarter 3, Module 7. What's in? You learned in the previous module that there are 3 different ways of heat transfer, namely conduction, convection, and radiation. So, let's have a review about it by answering the following activity. Identify the method of heat transfer that takes place in each illustration. Write the number of each figure in the assigned column. Some illustrations may show more than one form of heat transfer. So here are our illustrations for what's in. Number 1, oven toaster. 2, hair dryer. 3, a flat iron. 4, bonfire. 5, microwave oven. 6, a man sunbathing. 7, charcoals burning. 8, chicken being cooked in a frying pan. 9, a hot steaming tea. And number 10, we have an iron curler. So let us now answer what's in. In number 1, the oven toaster transfers heat by means of conduction. Placing your food in this hot wire rack transfers heat to the food because they are in direct contact with each other. 2. The hair dryer transfers heat by means of convection. So the heat source is a heating coil inside the hair dryer, which heats the surrounding air. In order that this warm air now reaches the wet hair, a fan creates an airflow, creating convection currents. Next, number 3, placing your hand near this flat iron, so heat is transferred from the flat iron to your hand by means of radiation. 4. A bonfire transfers heat by means of radiation. 5. A microwave oven transfers heat to the food by means of radiation. 6. A man sunbathing, so the heat from the sun reaches this man because of radiation. 7. Placing your hand above the charcoal burning in this container, so heat is transferred from the charcoal to your hand by means of radiation. 8. So the cooking chicken in the frying pan releases heat and it reaches your hand if you place it above the chicken by means of radiation. Next, number 9. So for a steaming hot cup of tea, convection is taking place. So the warmer tea below rises to the top and the much cooler tea at the top sinks at the bottom, creating convection currents. And number 10, if you place your hand near this iron curler, heat transfers from the iron curler to your hand by means of radiation. So before we formally start our discussion of Module 7, let us first have an overview of electricity. So electricity is also called as electrical energy. Electrical energy is required to operate appliances, gadgets, and machines. So if we don't have electrical energy, then all of our appliances, gadgets, and machines will not work. So electrical energy is very important. The ever-present nature of electricity is demonstrated by lightning and the motion of living organisms. So in nature, we have electricity and it's present in the form of lightning and motion of living organisms. So this is made possible by electrical signals sent between cells. So let me show you some pictures of this. So here are pictures of lightning. And here's a picture of electrical signal sent between cells. Electricity originates from the motion of charges. So all matter is made up of atoms or combinations of atoms called molecules. So an atom is the smallest particle of an element. And a molecule is the smallest particle of a compound. In the previous slide, we have mentioned that the atom is the smallest particle of an element. And in this illustration, we could see that the atom is made up of even smaller parts. So these smaller parts are called subatomic particles, and they are as follows. Number 1, proton. Number 2, electron. And number 3, neutron. So the proton is the positively charged particle of an atom. The electron is the negatively charged particle of an atom. And the neutron is the neutrally charged particle of an atom. So when we say neutrally charged, it means it's not positive, it's not negative. So it's neutral, so zero charge. So let us take a look again at our illustration of the atom. So the atom is the smallest particle of an element, and it is made up of 3 subatomic particles: proton, neutron, and electron. So in this illustration, you would see that the protons and neutrons are in the center of the atom, making up the nucleus. So proton and neutron are found in the nucleus. You could also see here that our proton is positively charged. So meron siyang positive sign na mark. And then our neutron is neutrally charged. So it's not positive, it's not also negative. Okay? And then the electrons surround the nucleus. So in this illustration, you would see na ang ating mga electrons ay merong mark na negative sign. So it means that our electrons are negatively charged. The varying atomic composition of different materials give them different electrical properties. What's new? The mystery of the plastic comb. One day, after Andres combed his hair using a plastic comb, "Wow, brother, you look great today." "Ha ha, really? It's my first day at work. I should look great." Andres accidentally placed the plastic comb near the paper doll that was cut by his sister Mela. "Brother, look, my paper doll." "Whoa, how did the comb attract the paper doll?" And both were surprised on what happened next. So let us now answer the guide questions. Number 1, how did the plastic comb attract the paper doll? And 2, what happened to the plastic comb? What happened to the paper doll? So here is the answer. So for number 1, the plastic comb attracts the paper doll because it became electrically charged. So paano nagkaroon ng electric charge ang ating plastic comb? So kanina sa ating kwento, 'di ba? Ang ginawa ni Andres ay nirub niya yung kanyang plastic comb sa kanyang hair. So nung nirub ni Andres yung kanyang plastic comb against his hair, the comb became electrically charged. Next, number 2. The plastic comb gained charges and the paper doll gained charges from the plastic comb. So, paano nangyari ito? So, remember kanina, diniscuss natin sa overview ng electricity na ang atom has 3 subatomic particles: protons, electrons, and neutrons. So, sa tatlong subatomic particles na yon, alin ang sa tingin nyo pwedeng matransfer from one object to another? Okay? So, syempre, ang pwede lang na ma-transfer doon ay electrons. So, nung nirub ni Andres yung comb sa kanyang hair, yung electrons ng hair niya ay nalipat sa suklay. So, yung suklay niya, nag-gain ng negative charge. Okay? Tapos, yung paper doll, nung nilapit ni Andres yung plastic comb sa paper doll, yung charge ng plastic comb ay na-transfer doon sa ating paper doll. The plastic comb attracts paper because of the electric charges. Electric charge is the quantity of electricity that is held in an object, and it comes in two types. So we have positive charges and negative charges. So a positive charge is represented by a plus sign, and a negative charge is represented by a negative sign. In the case of the plastic comb, the comb has an equal number of positive and negative charges that makes it electrically neutral. It means it has no ability to attract the paper. But after rubbing it into a dry hair, it gains electric charge and gets the ability to attract the paper. So, kanina, doon sa ating kwento, bago gamitin ni Andres yung suklay niya ay electrically neutral. Ang ibig sabihin ng electrically neutral, ang number ng positive charges, ang number ng protons, at number ng negative charges or number ng electrons ay equal. Pag equal, ibig sabihin neutral, neutrally charged yung object. Kapag neutrally charged ang isang object, it has no ability to attract. Pero, paano nangyari na yung paper doll ni Mela ay na-attract nung suklay? Okay? So, anong ginawa ni Andres? Ang ginawa niya, ni-rub niya yung suklay sa kanyang dry hair. So, nung ginawa niya to, nagkaroon tayo ng transfer of charges. So, yung electrons mula doon sa buhok ni Andres ay nalipat sa suklay. So, yung suklay, nag-gain ng electrons, making it negatively charged. So, na naging negatively charged yung ating suklay at nilapit ni Andres yung suklay doon sa paper doll, na-attract yung paper doll. Okay? So, biglang dumikit doon sa suklay ni Andres. The process of gaining charges is known as charging process. Matter can be charged in three ways: charging by friction, charging by induction, and charging by conduction. So to give you an overview of what these three types of charging processes means, let us take a look at this picture. In charging by friction, there needs to be rubbing the two objects together. So here we have a balloon being rubbed into the hair of this girl. So the electrons from the girl's hair is transferred to the balloon, making the balloon negatively charged. Next, in charging by induction, this is a method used to charge an object without actual touching the object to any other charged object. So, yung charged object natin ito, tapos yung neutral object natin ito. So, kung mapapansin nyo, may space sa pagitan nila, so hindi sila actual na magkadikit. Okay? So, in charging by induction, there is no actual contact between these two objects. And in charging by conduction, so it involves the contact of a charged object to a neutral object. So, here, ang charged object natin ay itong sphere na ito, itong metallic sphere na ito. So, nung hinawakan nung girl yung metallic sphere, the charge was transferred from the metallic sphere to her. Tapos, ito yung naging effect. Nag-rise yung kanyang hair. It is important to remember that during the charging process, the amount of charge lost is equal to the charge gained by an object. So according to the law of conservation of charge, charges cannot be created nor destroyed, but can be transferred from one material to another, and the total charge in a system remains constant. So to illustrate this point, let us take a look at our picture here. So we have object A and object B. So ang ating mga plus sign, this represents the protons in our atom. And then the negative sign are the electrons in our atom. So ang object A natin and object B has equal number of electrons and protons. So dito meron tayong 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tig 6 na electrons and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tig 6 din na protons. Okay? Now, pag ang object B ay nilapit natin dito sa object A, Tapos, nagkaroon sila ng rubbing. Okay? Nirub natin yung object B dun sa object A. Ang mangyayari, yung object A will lose electrons. Yung electrons ni object A ay malilipat or matatransfer sa object letter B. So, ang mangyayari, yung ating object letter A ay mababawasan ng electrons. Ang electrons na lang niya ay 1, 2, 3. Tapos, yung tatlong electrons na nawala sa kanya ay na-transfer sa object letter B. Kaya yung object letter B natin ay meron ng 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 na electrons. So, ano ibig sabihin nito? Yung ating object A, dahil nabawasan siya ng electrons, nag-lose siya ng electrons, it becomes positively charged. Kasi mas marami na ngayon yung kanyang protons. Tapos, si object B naman natin, dahil nag-gain siya ng mga extra electrons mula sa object A, mas marami na yung kanyang electrons, siya naman ngayon ay negatively charged na. Okay? So, kung makikita natin dito, yung electrons natin, hindi siya nasira, hindi siya nawala. Ano lang nangyari? Yung electrons natin ay na-transfer doon sa ating object letter B. And, kung makikita natin, yung total charge natin dito sa system ay constant. So, pag inad natin yan, ang electrons natin ay 12 pa rin. So, nung nagsimula tayo, 6 plus 6, ang electrons natin ay 12. Tapos, nung nagtapos tayo, 3 plus 9, ang electrons pa rin natin ay 12. So, next, guide question number 3. Do you think a metallic comb will also attract the paper doll? So the answer for this, a metallic comb will not attract the paper doll. So this idea will be explained further later in the discussion. Let us unbox the idea. The gaining and losing of charges is referred to as blank. There are three ways of charging process, namely blank, blank, and blank. During the charging process, the amount of charge lost and the amount of charge gained is blank. So the answer is, the gaining and losing of charges is referred to as charging process. There are three ways of charging process, namely friction, induction, and conduction. During the charging process, the amount of charge lost and the amount of charge gained is equal. So let us do experiment number 1, charge to experience. Objective, in this activity, you will be able to charge materials by friction. Materials, plastic cover, tissue paper, paper, and scissors. Procedure, cut small strips of papers. 2. Rub the tissue paper against a plastic cover. 3. Place the rubbed plastic cover above the bits of paper. And 4. Remove the bits of paper by wiping the plastic cover with tissue. Repeat the procedure twice and record your observation. Figure number 1 shows procedure number 1. So, cut small strips of papers and then rub tissue paper against a plastic cover. And then figure number 2 shows step number 3. So, place the rub plastic cover above the bits of paper and you will see something happening. So, there's attraction between the plastic cover and the bits of paper. Guide questions. Number 4. What happens when the plastic cover is placed above the bits of paper? 5. Is there any interaction between the paper and the plastic cover? And 6. Does the rubbing of tissue paper cause the attraction between the paper and the plastic cover? How? So let us answer number 4. The bits of paper were attracted to the plastic cover. 5. Yes, the paper was attracted to the plastic cover. And 6. Yes, the rubbing of tissue caused the plastic cover to be charged. So later, we will explain how this happened. Let us now proceed with experiment 2, pass the charge. Objectives. After performing this activity, you should be able to charge a material by induction and conduction. Setup A. The materials needed are jar with plastic lid, copper wire, plastic straw, 2 small pieces of aluminum foil, electrical tape, plastic cover, and tissue paper. Procedure: punch a hole at the center of the jar cover. 2. Take the copper wire and slide it through the plastic straw and make a little hook at the bottom end of the copper wire. 3. Put the two pieces of foil on the hook, one after the other, using the hole that you made on each of the pieces of foil. The two pieces of foil should now be touching together at the end of the hook. 4. Take the plastic lid and put it on top of the jar and secure it with some electrical tape to make sure the lid is firmly fixed on the top of the jar. 5. Rub a tissue paper against a piece of plastic cover. 6. Bring the plastic cover close to the copper wire without them touching each other. And 7. Record your observation. So this is what our finished product will look like. We call this an improvised electroscope. An electroscope is an instrument used to detect the presence of electric charge on a body. It detects charge by the movement of a test object due to the electrostatic force on it. So, paano natin ginawa ang ating improvised electroscope? So, dapat meron tayong jar, okay? Tapos, dapat yung jar natin merong plastic lid. So, we are going to create a hole at the center of our plastic lid, yung takip ng ating jar, lalagyan natin ng butas sa gitna. And then, kukuha tayo ng copper wire. Tapos, i-insert natin yung copper wire sa plastic straw. Tapos, gagawa tayo ng maliit na hook doon sa dulo ng ating copper wire. And then, kukuha tayo ng 2 pieces of aluminum foil, lalagyan nyo ng butas, yung aluminum foil, and then you are going to insert the aluminum foil doon sa ating hook. And then, after that, we are going to secure our plastic lid with an electrical tape para hindi masira yung ating setup. And then, we're all set. So, this is our improvised electroscope. So, the next step after the making of the improvised electroscope is to rub a tissue paper against a plastic cover. And then, bring the plastic cover near but not touching the copper wire. So, after doing that, we are now going to observe what happens. And then, we need to answer the following guide questions. So, number 7, were you able to charge the copper wire? Explain how this happened. Number 8, is it necessary for the plastic cover and the copper wire to come in contact for charging to happen? Why or why not? So here are the answers for number 7. Were you able to charge the copper wire? Explain how this happened. So yes, it happened when the plastic cover was placed near but not touching the copper wire. Bringing the charged plastic cover nearby the copper wire will cause charge movement and separation in the copper wire. So, nung yung tissue paper ay nirub natin sa ating plastic cover, the plastic cover became electrically charged. Tapos, yung charged na plastic cover, nung nilagay natin siya near but not touching the copper wire, some of the charges of the plastic cover was transferred to the copper wire. So, yung copper wire natin ay na-charge even without actual contact with the plastic cover. So, paano natin malalaman na may charge yung copper wire natin? Itong strips of aluminum foil natin ay magse-separate or maghihiwalay siya. Okay? So, later explain natin kung bakit naghiwalay yung strips of aluminum foil natin. Next, question 8. Is it necessary for the plastic cover and the copper wire to come in contact for charging to happen? Why or why not? So the answer is no. Charging can also happen without contact by bringing a charged object, the plastic cover, nearby a neutral object, the copper wire. Let us now go to experiment 3 of Pass the Charge. So this time, we will be doing setup B. Procedure number 1, repeat all steps in setup A except step 6. So doon sa setup A, ang ginawa natin sa step 6, bring the plastic cover close to the copper wire without them touching each other. So hindi magkadikit yung plastic cover and copper wire doon sa setup A. Pero ngayon, sa setup B, iba na yung gagawin natin. So, bring the charged plastic cover in contact with the copper wire. So, this time, ilalapit na natin ng husto, meron ng actual contact yung plastic cover and copper wire. Okay? And then, number 2, touch the tip of the copper wire after 1 minute with your finger. And then, number 3, record your observation. So, guide questions. Number 9. What do you think is the charge acquired by the plastic cover after rubbing it against the tissue paper? 10. What causes the pushing of the aluminum foil apart? 11. What is the purpose of touching the plastic cover in step number 2? And 12. What is the charge acquired by the copper wire after a charged plastic cover was brought into contact with it, after a finger touched it? So for number 9, what do you think is the charge acquired by the plastic cover after rubbing it against the tissue paper? So the tissue paper will lose electrons. Thus, the plastic cover will acquire a negative charge. So dito sa number 9, nung nirub natin yung tissue paper sa plastic cover, yung electrons ng tissue natin ay nalipat sa ating plastic cover. So mas marami na ngayong electrons ang plastic cover, mas konti na ang electrons ng tissue. So sa tissue, mas marami ang protons, kaya ang tissue ay positively charged. Tapos si plastic cover, nalipat yung electrons ng tissue sa kanya, so mas marami na siyang electrons, kaya si plastic cover ay negatively charged. So next, number 10, what causes the pushing of the aluminum foil apart? So bakit nag-separate yung ating aluminum foil? Noong nilapit natin yung ating plastic cover dito sa ating copper wire. So when you rub a tissue paper against a piece of plastic cover, electrons from the tissue paper will get transferred to the plastic cover, which means that the plastic cover will become more negative or negatively charged, and the tissue paper will become more positive. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, kapag yung tissue paper nirub natin sa plastic cover, yung plastic cover natin will become more negative kasi nag-gain siya ng electrons. Yung electrons galing dun sa tissue paper. Na-transfer yung electrons ng tissue papunta sa ating plastic cover, kaya si plastic cover natin ay mas maraming electrons na siyang negatively charged. Si tissue paper naman will become more positive kasi nalipat yung electrons niya doon sa plastic cover. So, yung tissue paper natin, mas maraming protons, kaya ang ating tissue paper ay positively charged. Now, when you move the plastic cover closer to the copper wire, this will cause the electrons that are on the piece of copper to move down the tube and away from the plastic cover because similar charges repel each other. So, anong ibig sabihin nito? So, di ba meron tayong plastic cover dito, tas dinikit natin siya sa ating copper wire. So, dahil negatively charged yung plastic cover, yung electrons dito sa copper wire natin ay bababa sa ating tube papunta dito sa ating hook. So, yung hook natin hanggang baba ay negatively charged na. At dahil negatively charged ang hook at dyan nakasabit yung dalawang aluminum foil, yung dalawang aluminum foil natin ay pareho ring negatively charged. Okay? Ngayon ang tanong na susunod, bakit naghiwalay yung aluminum foil? Bakit sila nag-spread apart? Bakit sila nag-separate? So, here is the answer. It's because similar charges repel each other. When the electrons are pushed down the copper wire, they will be transferred down into the hook and onto the pieces of foil. At this stage, both pieces of aluminum foil have become negatively charged. And since negative charges repel negative charges, this explains why the two aluminum pieces spread apart. So, kanina, sa previous slide, sinabi natin na yung plastic cover natin ay negatively charged. Now, nung dinikit natin yung plastic cover sa copper wire, yung electrons sa copper wire na originally ay neutral or walang charge, ay mapupush down pababa. So, sabi natin kanina, similar charges repel. So, lahat ng mga negative charges ng copper wire ay lalayo doon sa plastic cover na mayroong negative charge. Now, yung buong copper wire natin ay magiging negatively charged hanggang dito sa bandang hook. Now, dahil nakasabit yung dalawang strips ng aluminum foil natin sa ating copper wire na negatively charged, pati sila naging negative. Ang una nating strips of aluminum ay negatively charged, ang pangalawang strip ng aluminum ay negatively charged din, kaya sila ay nag-spread apart. Kasi negative repels negative. So no attraction will take place, magkakaroon tayo ng separation of our aluminum foil. Number 10, what is the purpose of touching the copper wire in step number 2? Okay, so dun sa ating first procedure, sa ating experiment number 3, ang ginawa natin, yung plastic cover ay dinikit natin dito sa ating copper wire. So, yung electrons ng copper wire ay na-push down hanggang dito sa hook. So, naging negatively charged ang ating copper wire, pati yung dalawang strips of aluminum natin. That's why they spread apart. Now, yung sumunod na procedure after that is to touch the copper wire with a finger. So, nung tinouch natin yung copper wire with a finger, what happened? Ano ang nangyari? Okay? So, when the negatively charged copper wire is touched, its charge becomes grounded or neutralized. The positively charged protons enter the copper wire and neutralize the negative charge. So, nung hinawakan ng daliri yung copper wire, ang nangyari, yung ating copper wire na negatively charged ay na-grounded or na-neutralize. So, lahat ng excess negative charge ay na-balance out. So, pumasok ang positively charged proton sa copper wire at na-neutralize niya yung negative charge. So, sa tingin ninyo ang nangyari sa ating aluminum foil? So, sa tingin nyo ba, spread apart pa rin sila or separated? So, ang mangyayari ay sila ay magdidikit na. So, kapag magkadikit yung dalawang strips ng aluminum foil sa ating improvised electroscope, ibig sabihin ay wala ng charge. Okay? So, wala nang charge doon sa ating electroscope. Next, number 12. What is the charge acquired by the copper wire after a charged plastic cover was brought into contact with it, after a finger touched it? So, the answer, the copper wire acquired a net negative charge when a charged plastic cover was brought into contact with it. After touching it with a finger, the copper wire became grounded or neutral. So, in the first question, noong meron tayong nilapit na charged plastic cover sa ating copper wire, the electrons within the copper wire was pushed down. So, yung buong copper wire natin ay naging negatively charged, as well as the strips of the aluminum foil na nakasabit sa hook. So, our two strips of aluminum foil spread apart because negative repels negative. Now, nung tinouch naman ng finger yung ating copper wire, our copper wire became grounded or neutral. So, yung positively charged particles from the finger entered our copper wire and neutralized the excess electrons in the copper wire, making our copper wire now neutral. So, dahil neutral na yung copper wire, pati yung nakasabit sa kanya na strips of aluminum foil ay naging na ring neutral. That's why yung strips of aluminum foil ay magkadikit na after a finger touch the copper wire. After performing the activities, you can now differentiate the three charging processes. In experiment 1, when you rub the tissue paper against the plastic cover, some of the electrons from the tissue were transferred to the plastic cover that makes the plastic cover electrically charged. If a charged plastic cover is held near to bits of neutral paper, the attraction between the paper and the plastic would be sufficient to raise the paper off the table. So, sa experiment 1, we learned na pag nirub natin yung tissue doon sa ating plastic cover, the electrons of the tissue paper would be transferred to our plastic cover. Now, yung ating plastic cover ay magiging electrically charged, and if we put bits of paper below the charged plastic cover, yung electric charge na meron yung plastic cover would be enough para dumikit yung mga bits of paper na to sa ating plastic cover. So in experiment 1, in that activity, the process used is charging by friction. So charging by friction is the transfer of electrons from one uncharged object to another by means of rubbing. So sa charging by friction, it involves rubbing. So the example given in our experiment 1 is tissue paper and plastic cover. So electrons, which are negatively charged, may be rubbed off one material and onto the other. The material that gains electrons becomes negatively charged, and the material that loses electrons is left with a positive charge. So in our experiment number 1, the tissue paper loses electrons. That's why it becomes positively charged. So, yung electrons ng tissue paper na transfer sa ating plastic cover. So, mas marami na ngayong protons ang tissue paper kaysa electrons. At dahil doon, siya ay naging positively charged. Now, yung plastic cover naman natin, nag-gain ng electrons. So, mas marami na siyang electrons. Kaya, the plastic cover becomes negatively charged. Insulators can be easily charged by friction. Conductors cannot be easily charged by friction. So the next question would be why? So insulators such as tissue paper and plastic can be easily charged by friction as the extra electrons gained cannot easily escape. In conductors, it cannot be easily charged by friction as the extra electrons gained can easily escape. So in this illustration, we could see that conductors have many free electrons. So the electrons in conductors are loosely bound and they are free to move about through the material. That is why charging by friction in conductors is very hard because the electrons flow. In insulators, however, we could see that most atoms hold onto their electrons tightly. So, yung electrons sa mga insulators are not free to move about through the material. That is why charging by friction in insulators is much easier because the charges build up. So, insulators are poor conductors of electricity. They do not allow electric charges to flow. As a result, the charges build up into insulators like plastic cover, making it electrically charged and enabling it to attract another insulator like paper. Metals, on the other hand, are good conductors of electricity. They do not let the charge build up and they are unable to attract another insulator like paper. So metals are good conductors of electricity. They do not let charges build in it, they allow electricity to flow. So, ang mga insulators, okay, they are easily charged by friction because the charges build up. So, hindi madaling mag-flow ang electric charges sa mga insulators. Instead, naiipon siya. Kaya yung mga insulators natin, they become electrically charged, enabling them to attract another insulator. Sa mga conductors naman, however, okay, yung mga charges natin, they easily flow. That's why they are not good in attracting another insulator. Okay? So, they do not let the charges build. So, hindi naiipon yung charges, but instead, nagfo-flow yung charges natin. Can you identify conductors and insulators? Identify the given object, write I for insulator, and write C for conductor. Number 1, plastic comb. 2, steel. 3, dry wood. 4, rubber. And 5, copper wire. Conductor is any material that allows electric current to pass through it. So some examples of conductor are copper, aluminum, steel, or any metal. Insulators, however, is any material that does not allow electric current to pass through it, like the protective coating on wires. So some examples of insulators include plastic, rubber, glass, cloth, and wood. The third type of charging process is called charging by induction. In charging by induction, objects do not touch when the charges transfer. Charging by induction is a method used to charge an object without actually touching the object to any other charged object. The movement of electrons to one part of the object is caused by the electric field of the second object. The electric field around the charged object attracts or repels electrons in the second object. So to explain these two ideas, let us take a look at our illustration. So here we have two metal spheres mounted on insulating rods. So this is metal sphere A and this is metal sphere B. So both of the spheres are neutral. So ibig sabihin wala silang charge. Next, in the second diagram, we can see na merong nilagay na charged object near metal sphere A. Near but not touching. Okay? So the charged object is negatively charged. So, ang mangyayari, yung electrons dito sa ating sphere A would move away from this charged object. So, why? Kasi sabi natin sa mga previous slides, negative charges repel negative charges. So, dito sa sphere A, matitira yung mga positive charges and yung mga negative charges ay mag-move sa sphere B. Now, when sphere B is separated from sphere A, the two spheres have opposite charges. So, we could see here na yung ating sphere A is positively charged at nakadistribute na siya evenly throughout the surface of the sphere, and sphere letter B is negatively charged. Charging by induction is used in charging microphones, smartphones, and the likes. Also known as wireless charging, inductive charging is a method of charging the battery in portable electrical devices without having to plug the device directly into a power socket. In most cases, smartphones that are capable of being charged wirelessly need to be placed on a small flat charging pad or dock. An electrical charge passes safely from the pod to the phone across the tiny gap between them. So the charging pad still needs to be plugged into the mains electrical supply, but the phone sits loosely on top. Generally, a charged object and an uncharged object tend to attract each other due to the phenomenon of electrostatic polarization, which can be explained by the electrostatic law. When a neutral object is placed near a charged object, the charges within the neutral object are rearranged such that the charged object attracts the opposite charges within the neutral object. So to explain this, let us take a look at our illustration here. So dito sa picture na to, we could see that this balloon is negatively charged. Now, ang ating wall naman ay neutrally charged. So pag sinabi nating neutral ang isang object, it means yung number ng kanyang protons at number ng kanyang electrons ay equal. Now, paano nagkakaroon ng attraction sa pagitan ng isang charged object at isang neutral object? So, ang tawag sa phenomenon po na yon ay electrostatic polarization. Sa electrostatic polarization, yung charges within the neutral object ay nare-rearrange. So, let's take a look back at this illustration. So, again, ang ating charged object ay ang balloon, ang ating neutral object ay yung wall. So, ang nangyayari, yung charges sa neutral object natin, which is the wall, is rearranged. Such that yung charged object attracts the opposite charges within the neutral object. Dahil ang ating balloon ay negatively charged, yung mga positive charges sa wall ay mare-rearrange at siya yung mapupunta dito sa part na malapit doon sa balloon. Kaya nagkaroon ng attraction sa pagitan ng ating charged balloon at neutral wall. To further explain the phenomenon of electrostatic polarization, let us now state the electrostatic law. So the electrostatic law states that like charges repel and unlike charges attract. Kapag magkamukha ang charges, nagre-repel. Okay? Kapag unlike or hindi magkamukha ang charges, they attract. So, positive charge and negative attract. Negative and positive charge attract. Positive, positive repel. Negative, negative repel. So, always remember that the phenomenon of electrostatic polarization is due to the electrostatic law. So, opposites attract and like charges repel. In experiment 3, after touching the copper wire, you must have noticed that the previous interaction you have observed has ceased to occur. So what happened? When the negatively charged copper wire is touched, its charge becomes grounded or neutralized. The positively charged protons enter the copper wire and neutralize the negative charge. It indicates that the electrical force is gone and the copper wire has become neutral. So this process is called discharging. So in experiment number 3, when we touch the copper wire, the positively charged protons enter the copper wire and neutralize the negative charge. So yung ating copper wire ay naging neutral. So dahil neutral na yung copper wire natin, pati yung strips of aluminum foil na nakasabit sa hook ng ating electroscope ay naging neutral na din. So, naging neutral sila, nawala na yung electrical force, so yung ating strips of aluminum foil ay nagdikit na. Okay? So, we call this process as discharging or removing of charges. When discharging is done by providing a path between a charged object and a ground, the process known as grounding occurs. A ground can be any object that can serve as an unlimited source of electron that is capable of removing or transferring electron from a charged object to neutralize the object. One of the most important reasons for grounding electrical currents is that it protects your appliances, your home, and everything in it from surges in electricity. If your electrical system is grounded, all of that excess electricity will go into the earth rather than frying everything connected to your system. So, for example, if lightning was to strike or the power was to surge at your place for whatever reason, this produces dangerously high voltages of electricity in your system. If during that time, you are using a glue gun, so all of that high voltage of electricity could go to you if your electrical system is not grounded. Pero kung grounded ang electrical system mo, lahat ng excess na electricity na yon will go to earth instead of injuring you. So grounding is necessary in electrical devices because it can remove build-up of excess charge when needed. So electrical circuits are grounded by connecting them to the earth. So the earth has an infinite number of electrons to balance out the circuit. Guide questions number 13. Why is charging by induction method important? 14. How can we know if charge is present in an object? 15. What is the difference between charging by induction and charging by friction? And 16. Why is grounding important? So here are the answers. Number 13. Why is charging by induction method important? It is important because it is the only method that can be used to charge a neutral object without actual contact to a charged object. 14. How can we know if charge is present in an object? So, an electroscope, an instrument used for detecting the presence of an electric charge, can be used. So, in this module, we have been taught how to make an improvised electroscope. So, if the strips of aluminum foil are separated, it means that there is the presence of a charge. But if the strips of aluminum are together, it means there is no charge. Next, number 15. What is the difference between charging by friction and charging by induction? So, charging by friction is the transfer of electrons from one uncharged object to another by rubbing the two objects together. Charging by induction is a method used to charge an object without actually touching the object to any other charged object. So in friction, it involves rubbing, and in charging by induction, there is no actual contact between the two objects. 16. Why is grounding important? So one of the most important reasons for grounding electrical currents is that it protects your appliances, your home, and everyone in it from surges in electricity. The charging process you perform in Activity 3 is called charging by conduction. So when you brought the plastic cover in contact with the copper wire, this will cause the electrons that are on the piece of copper to move down the tube and away from the plastic cover because similar charges repel each other. So in our experiment number 3, we placed a negatively charged plastic cover in contact with a copper wire. Now, yung copper wire natin ay neutral, pero nung dinikit natin yung ating plastic cover, the electrons move down the tube and away from the plastic cover. So our copper wire becomes negatively charged, as well as the strips of aluminum that are in the hook of the copper wire. So, yung ating strips of aluminum, sila ay nag-separate. In charging by conduction, two objects will come into actual physical contact with each other. Charging by conduction involves the contact of a charged object to a neutral object. In contrast to induction, where the charged object is brought near but never contacted to the object being charged, conduction charging involves making the physical connection of the charged object to the neutral object. The body acquires the same charge as on the charging body. So in this picture, we can see a charge rod and a neutral sphere. So ang charge ng ating rod ay negative, tapos yung negative charge na yon ay na-transfer sa ating metal rod by actual physical contact. So magkadikit yung ating rod and yung ating metal sphere. So our metal rod acquires a negative charge. So, dito sa susunod na picture, makikita natin na yung negative charge is evenly distributed throughout the surface of our sphere. So, kung ano yung charge noong charging body, yun din yung magiging charge ng ating neutral object. In Activity 3, the tip of the copper wire is neutrally charged and has the same number of protons and electrons. Bringing the negatively charged plastic cover in contact to the copper wire made the aluminum foil negatively charged and caused the aluminum foil apart because like charges repel. It transfers some electrons from the plastic to the copper wire. So the total number of electrons remains the same. So energy is conserved, and this is stated in the law of conservation of charge. So, doon sa ating activity, nung nilapit natin yung plastic cover sa ating copper wire, so ang nangyari, the copper wire becomes negatively charged as well as our aluminum foil. So, the aluminum foil na parehong negatively charged, ang dalawang strips na ito ay nag-separate because like charges repel. So, negative charges repel negative charges. So, na-transfer yung electrons ng plastic to the copper wire. So, yung total number ng electrons remains the same kasi kung ano yung nawala sa plastic cover, yun naman yung nag-gain ng ating copper wire. So, the figure shows that during the charging process, electrons always move from the object with larger electrical charge to the object with smaller electrical charge. Let us now answer the different activities in What's More. Independent Activity 1, Septogram. Directions. Read the description for each set and unlock the words by placing the correct letter in the box. Use the codes to unlock the words and use the symbols in the boxes to complete the riddle. So these are the codes that you will use, and this is the riddle. Energy required to operate electrical devices. Here are the words that you need to unlock for you to be able to answer the riddle. Next, Independent Assessment 1, name the charge. Below are statements about charging processes of electrons. Put a check under column A if it is charging by friction, B for charging by induction, and C for charging by conduction. Independent Activity 2, how the objects become charged. Draw the charge distribution of the following object in different charging process. So, dito sa activity na to, maglalagay kayo ng positive sign or negative sign sa mga objects natin to show what happens before, during, and after the different charging process. So, number 1, charging by friction. 2, charging by conduction. 3. Charging by induction, grounding. 4. Charging by induction, polarization. So, yung mga objects natin, lalagyan nyo lang ng plus sign or negative sign. So, depende kung paano nag-flow yung charges. Next. Independent Assessment 2. Read the statement carefully and choose the best answer. Write the letter of the correct answer on the space before the number. Next, Independent Activity 3, charging process can be seen in our everyday lives. From the given pictures below, identify the charging process applied in each picture. Write your answer on the space provided below each picture. Use the guide below. A for charging by friction, B charging by induction, and C charging by conduction. Independent Assessment 3. Identify the description in column A by matching the words in column B. Write your answer on the space provided before the number. Next, what I have learned. The statements below describe the concepts presented in this module. Read each carefully, then select the level of mastery in which you feel you are into. So, 5 high mastery and 1 no mastery. So, concepts in the module are the following from number 1 to 6. So, you are just going to encircle which level of mastery you feel you are into. Is it number 5, high mastery? Is it 4, mastery? 3, approaching mastery? 2, low mastery? Or 1, no mastery? Assessment. Read the questions carefully. Write the letter of the correct answer on your answer sheet. See pages 18 to 19 of Quarter 3, Module 7. Additional activity, performance task number 3.7, be a snake charmer. So objective, identify the charging process acquired in the activity. Materials, plate, tissue paper, scissors, plastic ruler, and face towel. Procedure, 1. Put a plate on a piece of tissue paper and draw around it. Cut out the circle. Draw a spiral snake inside it. See the figure below. Next, to decorate your snake, use pen to draw a zigzag pattern and eyes, then cut along the spiral. 3. Rub a plastic ruler fairly and hard for 1 minute with a face towel, then touch the snake's head with your ruler. Observe what will happen. Guide questions. A. What happens to the snake after the ruler touches its head? B. What charging process is applied in the activity? C. What charge is acquired by the plastic ruler after rubbing against the face towel? So you need to have the following on your answer sheet. First, what I know, what's more, answer independent activities 1, 2, 3, independent assessments 1, 2, 3. What I have learned, assessment, and additional activities. So additional activities will be your performance task number 3.7. So if you are done, upload your answer sheets in PDF format to your Google Drive folder. The path is Science 7, Quarter 3, Module 7. Or you may send them in JPEG format to my messenger. So thank you for attending our Science 7 online class. God bless you all.